Hello and welcome to Sammy Spotlight. I'm your host, Austin Patrick. Today we are joined by Michael Hani, the host of Devil's Advocate on 90.5 SHSU. Stay tuned, we got a great show today. So Mike, tell me, how are you doing today?
Oh, I'm doing great, thank you. I woke up this morning to a text from an individual that's on my radio show that I was coming here today, and I figured I'd stop by.
All right. Well, first things first, what is Devil's Advocate about?
So it's a radio show that I established because I felt like people nowadays aren't being heard. I felt like the individual, the everyman, the person that's walking down the street is not being heard. I feel like what's happening is individuals are sitting there and they're being told what to think. They're being told on the news, they're being told on their broadcasts and stuff like that what's being going on. And no one's ever allowed to sit and think about their own opinions on things. And so what I decided to make the Devil's Advocate for is it's a place where you can go to a secluded area, not secluded area, a focused area with two other people in a room and simply talk about things that are important to you. It can be, we typically have one major topic every week. And what we do is we essentially have a topic that is not universally agreed upon. I wouldn't say controversial, but not universally agreed upon in the most point. And we simply talk about it. And where the name The Devil's Advocate comes from is typically the opposite view of whatever the individual comes into the show with, I will take up. I used to do debate for 2 years in high school, so I knew a little bit about it, and so I usually take up the opposite position and try and just prove a counterpoint to it. It doesn't serve to try and make a fight or anything like that. It's more of to help a healthy discussion, help people defend their views with more of finding what they believe.
All right. And you said you hope to help people find their own opinions about certain subjects. Is this what inspired you, or?
Well, yes, because partially I feel like what I hear a lot about people today is whenever I talk to somebody about anything that goes on in the news, something like that, which is typically something that is not agreed upon nowadays especially, they tend to regurgitate something that I've already heard. They tend to prove a point that is significant to whatever political party they may fold or whatever sort of thing you may align yourself to. Well, I believe that, humans are such interesting people. We all are so interesting people, and we all should have our own views on things. Nothing is ever set in stone. There's no one way to go about something. And so I like to listen and try and like I said, bring out the true beliefs of these people and understand it, and give them a chance to speak and let them be heard.
So, do you cover more politics or just any other topic?
So it kind of teeter-totters. If I usually hit something heavy one week on the show, I'll usually back it off and do something light. Like 1 week I had whether or not political correctness is inhibiting free speech. And then the next week I did, are video games a cause of violence? I bounce back and forth. I don't ever try and keep it too down melancholy. It's a safe space. It's a space to talk about your opinions and be heard.
So how do you choose these guests for your show?
As of right now, I've just been going around and asking individuals I know and those that know them. But I hope to eventually get a spot to be able to ask people out on the street and be able to ask people, just the everyday person that I don't know, and get their opinions on things, because I feel like that's what's important, is getting to know other people's opinions. If I'm asking people that I know, then I'm essentially just asking the same opinion, because the odds are if you're friends with someone, they have similar ideals than you. I don't want that. I want people that have vastly different views than me. I want people that have the same views as me. I want all over the place. I want to know people. And so I hope to eventually broaden out and get as many people and as many different backgrounds and as many different identities as possible.
And then, do you have a co-host?
Yes, I actually have a co-host. He's actually in the comms department here. He's Stacy Brown. and he came on the show after I did an interview with him. He came on and we talked about, like I said earlier, the video games. And we talked about it a little bit, and then he was very knowledgeable on the topic, so naturally. And then afterwards he said, I want to do this. I want to be on the show too. And so I said, I don't mind. And we went and spoke to Professor Reed at the communications department and got him on the show. And now what he does is, instead of it being me and another individual just speaking on two different points, it's me, another individual, and him as a kind of a mediator. He acts as a mediator for the most part, but sometimes he provides more information and stuff like that too. It's a very natural conversation. It's almost like a podcast style in the radio show format.
All right. And so, have y'all done podcasts before, or is it strictly radio?
So I have attempted to do a few podcasts before, but I never had a platform. So it never really took off. And so then I decided I saw in the ad on Instagram, I saw the post for Help Wanted on the radio shows. And so I went and spoke to Professor Reed and created my own, and thus I am here today. It was a spur of the moment thing that I decided to do, and I'm very happy I did it.
That's good. But do you plan on expanding your show?
Oh,
different territories?
as much as I could. If I am able to and people would like to, I would love to have multiple different kinds of segments. I would love to have it where it's spaced out into different topics, talking about different things. Even do it more than once a week, maybe, if time allows and things like that. It's a very conversation-heavy show. So in that case, it makes it to where it sometimes can get it drones. So that's why I have the music, which is really useful, because if it was just a regular podcast, there would be no music and I would just have to keep going. But with the music, I can break it up into like 15-minute segments, so then no one gets really bored.
Do you play any specific kind of music, or?
Whatever's on the radio show at that time. No, I just play whatever's on that time. Usually that's something like either rock or modern pop. That's typically what's on the radio show at that time.
So more of a show host than a radio host?
Yes.
Well, let's go back to your show. What are tell me more subjects you talk about on your show.
So the topic I started off, my first topic was whether or not this individual, I had an individual named with Terry Thibodeau, and he's actually a professor, he's Dr. Terry Thibodeau at Sam Houston. And I had him come on, and we talked about whether or not a utopia is possible. And we talked about what our ideas of utopia was, and things like that. And it was more of a constructed argument. But then the next week I had the individual talking about free speech and things like that. Very fun and very fun conversation, because they had very vastly different views than I did. So I was able to ping and pong off of them very well. And then the next show I had was an individual that was a chemist, or he's a major in chemistry. And he was talking about whether or not drugs should be legal, and certain kind of drugs. He talked about how what we have currently isn't working and what he thought could be better. And so he came on and we talked, and we had a really fun conversation, because it was easy. When you have something that's very, very far-sighted like that, I'm not saying it's like extreme, but far-sighted, it's easy to poke holes in it and make them think. And so I had a lot of fun with that one. And then we've also had things like I said with Stacy. When Stacy came on, I had video games. And then we've done things like, I'm up in this show that I'm doing today actually. Today at 4, I'm going to be talking about religion and why it's important, or if it's important, and things like that. And so the show typically has a topic, and it's not like I come on with questions and I'm interviewing them. It's a conversational piece.
Now, out of all those subjects, which one was your favorite? Like, have a story about that specific show? Or?
So the individual that I had on for the drugs and whether or not they should be legal was very fascinating, because he was a chemist and everything, and he was very interested in it. But the one where it was about whether or not political correctness is free speech, or inhibits free speech was very fascinating. Like I said, because the individual had very different views than I did. And then also, whenever we started to talk about it, we started to get into more things like whenever you protest. Is it protesting if you are standing in the middle of a street, or is it a public disturbance? Things like that. And we got to talk, and it just kind of went down this spiral of just craziness, but at the same time, productive. And I loved every second of it.
And so do you think your show has helped these people form their own opinions?
Definitely a couple of them. I've had a couple that have come on and said, man, this was awesome. I want to come on again so I can talk about it more, and things like that. And it's most people come into shows like this, and they talk about topics like this, and they have their own formed opinions, already formed. And what I aim to do is essentially make them solidify or change. And I don't deliberately say you need to change your opinion. What I do is I try and, provide counterpoints, and them go, I didn't think about that. You know what I mean? Yeah. And so whenever I have individuals on and they talk about certain topics and things, it's very fascinating to see how they react to different points of views and in a conversational text. Because the thing about the show is, if you were to talk about some of these topics out in the middle of the street, you'd get yelled at, shut down. People wouldn't want to talk. No, people don't want to talk about that. But the fact that this is a secluded area where we are just 3 people in a room talking about a subject in a very conversational manner makes people open up a lot more. And I love it. I love getting to hear people's true thoughts.
And so you mentioned debate school.
Yes.
How do you take those skills and apply it here? I know you've said you try to be the devil's advocate. But...
So whenever I'm in show, or whenever I'm on the show, the position that the person usually takes is either what we call aff or neg, which is affirmative or negative. And what that means is they're for the topic or they're against it. Pretty self-explanatory. Whenever they take up a position that is affirmative or negative, I turn around and I take up the opposite position. And essentially, the show is very there's not a structure, and there's not like evidence and stuff like that. I'm not going to pull up a paper on you. You know what I mean? It's more of anecdotal and stuff like that. It's a conversation. And so whenever an individual comes up and wants to talk about a certain topic, and I try and bring my expertise into it, I typically take up a form of like different things like utilitarianism and stuff like that, and different topics that are overviews and different things that I can use to kind of poke and prod at their thoughts and get them thinking.
Do you have a favorite philosophy to use?
Ooh, not really, I wouldn't say, because a lot of the times I'm open to change. I'm open in the middle of the conversation. If I see one thing isn't working, then I change. And so a lot of the time, it's like I said, most of the time it's utilitarianism. What's better for the greater good is what's best. And that's what I choose to choose most of the time. But sometimes in certain specific conversations and things, that doesn't work. So I'll switch around.
So I do hear you're going to be doing a remote broadcast this week, correct?
Yes, I do believe so. On Thursday, what I'm going to be doing is essentially trying to see if I can get other individuals to come onto the show. And what I have is I have a topic picked out, and we're going to be doing it in the yard, and it's going to be very fascinating. I'm excited.
Well, I hope it goes well.
Thank you.
But can you mind give us a little spoiler and tell us what the topic is, or is that secret?
I'm going to keep it secret for right now, because the topic is one of those that is very opinionated. Well, I guess I can go ahead and tell you. The topic is whether or not you feel like our democracy nowadays is really working. Whether or not you feel like your votes matter, things like that. Mm-hmm. And so I hope to hear individuals talk about whether or not they think it does and why it's still working, or whether or not it isn't. And so I'm excited to see if I can get some sort of response out of people.
Well, I hope it goes well. Thank you, Michael. That's all the time we have for this week. And you know what? Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much.
And please join us next week for another episode of Sammy Spotlight. Have a great day.